My name's Peter Sumpton, and this is the Marketing Study Lab podcast. A podcast for those that are thinking, have thought and are doing, or already have a marketing qualification. Or even if you haven't, and you just want to know that a little bit more about what good, happy marketing is. As we cover a whole host of marketing topics, I chat to some amazing guests, each one a superstar in their own niche. And if you have a burning marketing question already, or after this episode, get in touch. We'll chat it through. peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk. Or find me on LinkedIn. The link is in the show notes. If you'd like to leave a review on iTunes, this will really help others find this podcast and spread the marketing word. Now let's get on with today's episode. So this week, we're doing something a little bit different, because it's actually Christmas Day. Yep, this podcast has been released on Christmas Day. And what crazy fool does that? Well, me, in fact. The reason being that I want to keep it consistent, to launch each episode on the same day of the week, which happens to be Tuesday. I'm not so sad enough to get up that early on Christmas Day and record this podcast because I've got presents to open instead. So what I'm going to do in this episode and the next one is take a look back at the year, my year in podcasting, my very first year. And what I want to do is share with you the top parts of interviews that I've done with all the superstars that have been on the Marketing Study Lab podcast so far. And also take a look back at some of the top tips that I've shared with you, and maybe even some of the takeaways. We'll just see how it goes and how long it is. Each guest has brought so much value, and I cannot thank them enough. But more importantly than that, even though the guests do make the podcast, I can't thank each and every one of you. Even if you've downloaded one, or this is the only one you've downloaded, or you've downloaded them all, or you listen to part of it, or you just listen to it to send you to sleep, whatever it is you do, thank you so much for taking the time just to listen to me droning on about marketing and other elements and possibly ailments. We've done over 30 episodes, and we'll get into the 60s and the 100s next year and beyond, and I cannot wait to share all the value all my mega superstar, super top ace guests bring for you in the world of marketing, for you to grow, develop, understand, and fundamentally just enjoy what you do. So without further ado, if that's the right phrase, let's get on with this episode where we're going to take a look back at what some of our superstar guests have had to say. Oh, and happy Christmas, everybody. And let's let Tracey Tait, the marketing consultant, kick us off. So Tracey, give us your best one-liner.
Okay, now this is marketing related. I do hope you're going to like it. What is a pirate's favourite piece of marketing content?
I have no idea.
It's a webinar.
Oh, God. I knew it was going to be something to do with I couldn't. Yeah, I couldn't.
Sorry, do you know? Yeah, let's just end the podcast now because
yeah, I know. Yeah. Tracey, thanks for your time.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Bye-bye. So yeah, I thought marketing pirates.
That's very good. That topical as well. So let's move on to more important things. Yep, the old ones are the best, especially when they're topical and linked to marketing. But that wasn't where the interview or chat with Tracey finished. We carried on talking and we got into detail about customer personas. And it's so interesting what Tracey has to say about those.
Yeah, I think the audience as well, if they're going to call them customer personas, they might hear them called other things as well when they're looking through marketing or, looking at people who are discussing marketing online or in books. They can sometimes be called avatars or ideal clients or dream clients. And for me, ideally, it's just the ideal person that you want to sell to, that you want to buy your product or your service from you. Now, what I get my clients to do is I've got like a 6 steps to creating their ideal customer persona or avatar, ideal client, dream client. There's a reason I get them to do that, is because marketing for me is all about communication. So the more that you can actually have a conversation with the person that you want to sell with, that really helps develop the know, like, and trust. And that's people by people. So we're looking at creating personalities. So the first step is to really look at the demographics. So it's things like their age, gender, marital status, if they have children or not, the location, job title, annual income, level of education as well. So it's key things like that. Then the second step is about them, what's going on personally. So they've got a problem that you know that you can solve. So look at what their goals and ambitions are. What do they want? What challenges do they face in life? What are their pain points? And also when it comes to buying from you, think about what their objections would be. I can't afford it. It's too expensive. I don't have time. It's the wrong colour. And you can then actually understand how to talk about that in your marketing to manage those objections. And also as well, are they actually the decision maker? If they're not the decision maker, it's then thinking about strategies, how you get in front of that decision maker. The third step is about where the heck are they? So understanding where it is that they hang out. So if they are online or offline, and then breaking that down. So what websites do they visit? What blogs do they read? Who do they follow? What authors are they interested in? And lots of other little facts about them that you can then use to start those conversations with them. Then the next step is I get them to write your avatar's story. So think about what worries do they have? What problems do they face? And then remember to have empathy with them, because yes, we're selling products and yes, we're selling services, but we're also talking to a human being. Whether it's a large organisation or it's a coffee shop, you're actually dealing with real human beings, flesh and blood. So then think about emotions, because it's emotions that trigger an awful lot on us humans. So when they think about the problem that they've got, what do they think and feel? What do they see? What do they hear? What do they say? What do they do? How do they respond to what's actually going on? And then the fifth step is then write their story after they've bought your product or your service, because you know that you want them to have a happy ending. You know that you want them to be less hassled, less tired, less stressed, whatever it is your product or service offers. So then write their story. How would they feel? What would their day look like? What would they say about their day-to-day lives? Even if it's like, something like a new set of frying pans, because their old set of frying pans are done in, it burns their fried egg. This non-stick, you'll have your friends raving about your fried eggs in no time. So it's simple things like that. But the last step, the sixth step, when I get my clients to do this, they'll go, that's mad. Think about the clients that you don't want to have. What is it that you kind of like think that this isn't the kind of client that we want to target about? So focus on the clients, the customers that you don't want to include in your marketing, and get really clear on these. And that really kind of helps you when you start then having those important conversations.
Another topic that was really intriguing to me was when I spoke to Spencer Waldron, the regional director and head of story in Europe for Prezi. And what I really wanted to know is, how do you construct a good presentation? What are the fundamentals that Spencer can help you and I, be it in a marketing assignment or just at work in general? What are the fundamentals that we can add to our presentations which will take us to that next level of engagement?
Whew, have we got another hour?
Yeah, again, a condensed version would be good.
Yeah, I think, when you look at it, there's 3 parts to a presentation. There's the planning of it, there's the creating the presentation, and there's the delivery of the presentation. And I think what a lot of people do is go straight into whatever software that they're using and they'll start typing. And I think one of the most powerful things that you can do is really understand, why am I doing this presentation? Like, you normally give a presentation because you want somebody to make a decision in your favor, or you want to change their mind about something, or, you want to show that you understand the topic in a really in-depth way, or whatever it is. So what I always do is I use this little matrix by a guy called Andrew Bella, who wrote this book many years ago. But the matrix is called the Think Do matrix. And all you do is you ask yourself, what does my audience think now before I give that presentation? And what do I want them to think afterwards? And the same for do. What are they doing right now? And what do I want them to do afterwards? And if you fill in those 4 boxes, what that helps you do is understand what content should and should not go into the presentation. And one of the things that I obsess over a lot is how people make decisions. So, and I'll go into that in a bit, but like the reason then what I do is I add a 3rd column to that little matrix, and that's feel. What does my audience feel right now about this topic, and what do I want them to feel afterwards? And for me, that's the bit that's really powerful, because when you look how people make decisions, we all make our decisions in the same way, like it or not. First of all, we make an emotional connection to something. When you give a presentation, if you start by saying, here's a bright place in the future that I can take you to, or here's something that you want, or here's something that you want to understand, what is it that the audience wants to know or be or do in the future? And if you start with that, then what it tends to do is really connect to people. And they're like, I call it the nodding dog. They're like, yeah, I want that. But then like the modern cerebral cortex brain kicks in and says, hang on a minute, do I understand? Do I trust this person? Can they do what they say they're going to? Should I believe that they have that, and that's where you then start to give them evidence of why that's the case. So if you condense that down, I talk about emotion plus trust equals decision. So, and if you build your presentation in that way, and again, I could talk about structures for an hour, but you can use a proper structure. If you just Google presentation structures, like you'll come across them. Then what it does is it already, even before you open up a software and start to think about, okay, what am I going to make this look like? Or you've already understood what's the change in how people feel about something and how they think about something, and what do I want them to do, and what content am I going to put in. You've already got all that. So then it's about saying, okay, I've got this amazing canvas, and I can do this beautiful visual metaphor. And by visual metaphor, like, how do you use something to kind of symbolize what you're trying to do? Say you're on about saying, okay, here's what we're going to do for the next year. Here's our plan. Here's our strategy. And you can use, it's a very obvious one, but you could use like a mountain. So it's a gradual progression up the mountain, and you get to the success at the top. So I think, and then you start to design it in a way using this, kind of very few words, hopefully, and lots of images and lots of movement. And then, you move to the delivery stage, and the delivery stage is really boring because it's all about practice. There is absolutely, there are a few people that I've come across that can decide 10 minutes before, this is what I'm going to talk about, stand up in front of 100 people and just talk. But they are very few. Most of us need to lock ourselves in a room and just practice that presentation 20 times. And, I always say, when I get to the point where I just can't stand to hear the words anymore, I know I've got it in my head. And, and don't stick to a script. Like, just, have a script in the beginning, but allow yourself to just wander off it a bit, and just so you generally have the flow in your head. But it's practice.
Earlier on in the year, I had the great pleasure of chatting to PR Smith, the inventor, creator, marketing genius, if you want to call him that, because he is, of the sauce stack model. And this is exactly what he had to say about his own model.
So S for situation analysis, where are you now? And O for objectives, where are you going? S for strategy, how do you get there? So that's the SOS bit. And T for tactics, which are the details of strategy, which is the marketing mix. A is for action. Now, that's the bit that's forgotten in most plans. And that's the bit about how do you ensure that this wonderful plan will be executed with passion and enthusiasm and excellence itself. So that brings you into internal marketing, communications, training, motivation of your staff. How do you bring them on board? And then C is for control. And that is metrics and measurement. What are you going to measure? Sometimes stuff you look at once a month, sometimes once a day. Who's going to look at what? Who reports to whom? What do you do when you see a blip? That's the most important piece of it. And what does it cost to measure stuff? How long does it take to collect it, and so on? So that's SUSTAC. Add in the 3 M's, men, money, and minutes. That's men and women. The human resource, money, budgets, and minutes, time. Layer that, integrate that into your plan, and you've got a pretty good structure for a good logical plan.
Staying with marketing models, another successful, more recent model is the PRACE or RACE model for digital strategies and digital planning by Dave Chaffey. Again, I was so fortunate that he agreed for me to interview him in 2018. And this is his take, again, on his own model.
The first part is how you reach your audience, and that's gaining awareness through third-party sites, publishers, driving visits to your own site. And then the conversion phase we've separated out into 2. So ACT stands for encouraging interaction, because that's so difficult to do on your website or social media. So getting people on the right customer journey so they're not bouncing off the website the moment they arrive because you don't have the right calls to action or you don't have appealing branding. You don't have the right types of content there. And then the convert stage of RACE, we like to think of this as a multi-channel framework. So many businesses don't have online sales. If it's a higher value, more considered purchase, you need to talk to someone in sales or perhaps visit a store, pick up the phone and talk to someone. So convert is about how can we do the handoff between someone visiting the website and perhaps one of those more traditional forms of human communication to take someone through the process, or could be the other direction as well. Maybe there's already been an offline contact and you can make the sale online. So the final E of RACE is related to long-term customer engagement. So this is about how you generate loyalty amongst your audiences and advocacy as well to increase lifetime value. So it's a lot about research and then communicating with customers through email, social media, personalization on the website. So those are the 4 or 5 main areas of RACE, which we started, I think it was around 2011 I developed that when we were kicking off starting up Smart Insights. But since then, I've defined a more detailed framework where each part of RACE is split down into 5, and that gives you 25 areas, key activities to review your digital marketing against. So, for example, 2.2 in RACE might be specifically or is specifically about search marketing. 3.2 is specifically about landing pages and profiling the audience. So those are very much the tangible activities that you need to work on to get results.
It's time to leave models behind now. Oh, boo. I know. But don't worry, because we're jumping across the pond with our next guest, or snippet from a guest, Dr. Marci, a neuroscientist for Nielsen. It was so interesting to meet him in Boston, Massachusetts, and go through a whole host of things about the brain and the way we act and we think and we feel, and how marketing can influence the way we act and feel. But one snippet I want to take away from that interview and share with you now is a thing called price anchoring. And Dr. Carl provides a great example of price anchoring and how it can actually work in real life.
And people do price anchoring all the time. A recent example I came across was William in Sonoma, I believe it was, created a new bread maker, and it was priced on the order of $150 US, and they weren't selling very well. So instead of getting rid of the bread maker, they came out with a second bread maker that was $300 and was even better. And all of a sudden, they started selling the $150 bread makers a lot. Because now the value of that seems proportionally to be very good. So these framing effects are really critical for these buying decisions.
Well, we'll leave America behind for the time being, but hopefully I'll get back there and interview some more amazing guests. We're going to jump right back to the UK and straight into a chat that I had with the amazing Luke Southern from Drum. And he spoke in length about what successful content strategies look like.
Well, I mean, I guess you'd say, yeah, they're different because in the sense that they're selling different things, and even if they're talking to the same audience, they need to do it in a different way. I think one thing that's always the same, though, is taking a moment to ask the question about, you know, what is it should we even be doing content? What is it that you want to use it for? Because if it's about producing something that you know, you think gets your message across, but isn't really considered in the context of how the audience are going to consume it, then it's not really going to work. Because, you know, when you consider that we've all got incredibly low attention spans, goldfish levels now with continuous partial attention. I think we're at 8 seconds and a goldfish is at 9 or something like that, which is very worrying. Hopefully I'm holding your attention for longer than that right now. Everyone's using ad blockers. You know, me as a consumer, not necessarily somebody with a marketing hat on. Yeah, I've got an ad blocker on my phone, and I've got it on my laptop too. We don't want to be interrupted. And most of the stuff that, I think there's a stat that 60% of the content or, you know, stuff created by the world's leading 1,500 brands has little or no impact on consumers. It's just clutter. So when you've got clutter, low attention, and ad blocking going on, gaining attention and then holding attention for brands, for anybody, is harder than ever before. And, you know, we're obviously served up a whole load of excellent content from Netflix through to Amazon through to the BBC and everybody in between. So I guess one thing that's similar is starting with, what do you want to say as a brand? And even if you've got a clear message, you've got to consider how you're going to tell that in a way that is relevant to and useful or valuable for the audience that you're trying to talk to.
And my final guest, or my final snippet from a guest on this 2018 recap or review, or whatever you want to call it, and I'll be surprised if anybody's listening because it is Christmas Day. Merry Christmas in the UK anyway, and across the globe. But the final word snippet I'm going to leave to John Espirian. And this is all about writing an assignment or writing anything and breaking it down into components to make it easy and simple to understand. Not just that, but it avoids writer's block and also just staring at a blank page. Over to you, John.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, when it comes to writer's block, that hasn't affected me yet. I will religiously write down all of the ideas that I get. We tend to get a lot more ideas than we make note of. I've started using an app called Brain Toss, so I can quickly record a voice memo and email it to myself so I don't forget. And I do that a lot. And then in terms of writing, I think the writing part is relatively easy. Editing is the hard bit. So I recommend that people write everything that they can with no filter, no quality assessment, no stopping for spelling mistakes or you know, train of thought stuff. Just get it all down until your fingers are knackered and you can't put anything else down. And then leave it to prove, and then come back and then think about how you can edit without mercy. That's always the best way to write, I've found. In terms of writing sort of typical web content, I always recommend that people think about the one big idea that they want people to take away. In copywriting, really, the action point is the call to action, the CTA. What do you want that person to do as a result of having read the content? And everything should then work back from that thing. So if you want them to buy a product or subscribe, or trial a service, support a political cause, whatever it is, that's your goal. Then you work back from that to think, what headline, because the headline is hugely important. So there's some estimates say that 8 times as many people will read your headline as will then go on to read the rest of the content. So don't underestimate the value of a good headline. Think of what headline would support the action that you want the person to take. And then move on to front load all of your key information so that busy people get, the nugget of information that they came for. And write a short intro and then chunk up the rest of your content. So I usually say a brief intro and 3 supporting points, and then just get out of people's way, give them that call to action and move out of the way. So if you had a word count to work with, then thinking of what your key idea is and what the headline is to support that is your first task. And then you can think in chunks. So, if I was going to write 3 supporting points about one bit of information, then maybe it's a 1,000-word chunk and another 1,000-word chunk, and that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
So if you can then maybe you could break down that chunk further to say, well, here's my intro to that chunk, and here's the main stat I'm going to talk about, and here's the little mini conclusion, and then all of a sudden you're down to hundreds of words per bit, and then you've got a kind of repeating formula for the rest of it. And all of a sudden, once you start breaking it down like that, the word count becomes a lot less scary, rather than looking at a blank page and thinking, how the hell am I going to get 5,000 words out of this?
And that's it for this Christmas episode recap of 2018. I hope if you listened to this part and to all this the way through it, you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed putting it together and listening to some of the interviews and chats that I've had with some amazing, wonderful people. I cannot thank everybody enough for, 1, being on the Marketing Study Lab podcast, and 2, more importantly, listening to it, which is you. Thank you so, so much. If you celebrate Christmas, have a wonderful day, a wonderful week or 2 weeks off before you go back to work. If you don't, just have a nice break. And if you're not on holiday, please, please, please do something you're passionate about. Love it, enjoy it, go full on into it. And most importantly, use marketing to make your business or whatever you have a passion for successful. So the last words I will leave you with are happy 2018 marketing. Thank you so much for joining us today on Marketing Study Lab. It really means the world that you're listening to this out there. And hopefully I've provided you some value. If you're looking to know more about what Marketing Study Lab does and is about, go to marketingstudylab.co.uk or get in touch with me personally, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or feel free to email me at peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk. Happy marketing.